Hey guys, Hayden here, and today I'm bringing you my review of the final chapter of the StarCraft 2 saga, Legacy of the Void. I'm unlike the majority of players who play StarCraft 2, in that I'm not actually interested in the multiplayer side of things as much as the campaign. I found the story of StarCraft 2 quite engrossing so far, so my review will, as expected, look into all game modes and features, but it will mainly focus on the single player oriented side of things. With that being said, let's get started with the presentation side of the game. In my recent reviews, you will have noticed that the majority of the problems come under the presentation section. I'm happy to report that, in typical Blizzard fashion, the presentation here is absolutely excellent. The sheer amount of polish put into all areas of the game, such as the game's menus, outstanding cutscenes, and incredibly polished campaign interface, make this a real breath of fresh air, not only with regards to the last couple of games that I've reviewed, but regarding the year as a whole. Blizzard really are a credit to themselves when they quite clearly take so much time over the small details in a game that ultimately make the experience feel complete. Bravo Blizzard, you knocked this one out of the park yet again. Let's move over to the story now, which is something that I actually have mixed feelings about. Don't get me wrong, I'm very content with how this saga wrapped up, but in a lot of ways it felt as if it wrapped up a little bit too neatly. The progress throughout the campaign was full of twists and turns, augmented by the emotional and epic moments that was a joy to sit through. Come the end of the game though, and even though it's the sort of outcome I wanted to see, it was awfully cliche. This was compounded a bit by how I thought that the main antagonist of the StarCraft 2 saga, Amon, was a bit of a letdown in the end. You never get to really face him as such, which isn't really a criticism of the story itself, but it's more to do with the fact that it's something that I would have liked to have personally seen. Nevertheless, it's a fitting conclusion to a saga that started with the original StarCraft 16 years ago. So in that, I say that the story side of the game was a great success without taking too many risks. With the superb presentation side of the review out the way, let's move on to the graphics, which is where StarCraft 2 as a whole ultimately shows its age a bit. Don't get me wrong, StarCraft 2 is a good looking game, and when the action ramps up it can actually look spectacular in many ways. That being said, it's running on the exact same engine that debuted all the way back in 2010. Therefore, the game has, as you'd expect, aged quite significantly in that time. This shows more in the in-engine cutscenes more than anything, as at the time they were the cutting edge and offered some of the best visuals in gaming. Now however, I noticed the more wooden animations as well as the lack of really significant detail. In-game, I think the game has aged a little bit better, but it's by no means a great looking game. That being said, the art direction makes up for these slight deficiencies, as you'd expect from a Blizzard title. The lore of the franchise allows for Blizzard to expand on their artistic premise in a big way. Overall, the graphical side of the game is, as I said at the start, good. The sound design of Legacy of the Void is typically outstanding from a Blizzard point of view. I must admit, I still think that the voice acting is awfully campy and can sometimes result in a cutscene being a little less serious in tone than intended. That being said, the game still has the distinct sound effects regarding the game in general, and the soundtrack is unsurprisingly epic and excellent. In a nutshell, there's no real improvement to the sound design in StarCraft 2, as it's largely the same experience that we've come to expect from the franchise as a whole. This shouldn't be much of a surprise given the fact that the game is actually an expansion, but I'd still like to have seen a little bit more care when it comes to the voice acting. Now on to the bread and butter of the game. How does it play? The major gameplay differentiators here come down to the new units that have been added to the multiplayer side of the game, followed by the weird and wonderful experimental types of units that can be found in the single player campaign. Other than that, the way that the core game actually plays out is, as expected, identical to previous installments in that it is tight, fast, and an awful lot of fun. The campaign is slightly slower paced, as you'd expect, but it's still relentless at times, and this extends into the co-op missions as well. There's also the new Archon mode, where two players can take control of one army. What me and my friend have done is that one takes over the macro side of the game, so expanding, watching over the base, etc., whilst the other one focuses on microing the army and ultimately winning the game. For people like me who don't have the time to spend mastering the competitive side of StarCraft 2, this is quite a big value add, as it means that you only have to focus on half of the game essentially. For me, this is my favourite gameplay addition to StarCraft 2, straight after the co-op missions, which are also a lot of fun, but there's a very limited number of them at launch. There's DLC planned for this however, so I expect this mode to get fleshed out more in the future. And with that, we've reached the conclusion of this review. So, the final expansion of the StarCraft 2 saga. What do I think? Personally, I see Legacy of the Void as a breath of fresh air in a year that's been plagued with buggy and unfinished releases. It absolutely reeks of polish, and despite it being obviously familiar with regards to the overall mechanics, there's enough content here to easily earn a recommended purchase from me, and if you can also get into the multiplayer side of the game, there really is endless replayability here. Therefore, my final verdict for StarCraft 2 Legacy of the Void is a 9.5 out of 10. I feel compelled to add that 0.5 to the score simply because of the fact that the game is actually finished. As far as I'm concerned, Blizzard remains one of the premier role models in the video game industry today, and there's very little question to me that StarCraft 2 Legacy of the Void is one of the best games of this year. Even if you have no intention of playing the multiplayer portion of the game, this game is still well worth the full price of admission. Go buy it, you won't be disappointed. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been my review of StarCraft 2 Legacy of the Void. I hope that you enjoyed this, and if you did, I'd appreciate it if you left a like and even subscribe if you'd like to see even more gaming related content like this. If you didn't like it, please leave your criticism in the comments, as I'll take every little bit on board for the next video. Stay tuned if you want to see my top 5 games of the year for 2015, which will release soon. Thanks to everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.